And we actually, we're quite good at celebrating ourselves. And I'm impressed from what I hear, about what I hear from our guests here, because that you are expressing something that you don't hear often expressed in the world at large. Like around when, sometimes when you speak with your friends or so, and you say, well, I really want to find out who I am, they think you're kind of strange, right? Or they ask, what's the matter with you? When that should be a question that already has been taken care of by the time you're Hope's age. And some of you are quite a bit older and are only beginning to ask the question, which doesn't make much sense. Let's start first with what we traditionally do here. We focus ourselves. Focusing means to get ourselves together. That means getting our mind, our feelings, emotions, all of our instruments of perception and experience, get them together onto ourselves, so that whatever moments we're in, whatever we are experiencing, we're experiencing with the reference point of the awareness of who we really are. Because sometimes we experience things out there, but we forget about ourselves. And then that reference is not there, that connection is not there. So actually we ourselves are not nurtured or informed by the experience. Right? Doesn't that make sense? Think for yourself for a moment, how often do you get yourself so into outer circumstances and conditions that you completely forget about yourself. And some people even seek that out. Oh, I had a wonderful vacation. I completely forgot about myself. Well, you don't need to take a vacation. You can be in a semi-comatose state where you forget about yourself too, right? So anyway, let's just gather ourselves for a moment. Take a nice deep breath. And exhale, and just let yourself relax. And let yourself be present, your mind be present to you, your feelings and emotions, and just be present so that the experience of this evening, which may be life-changing for some of you, will actually be related to you. You, the conscious self, the conscious being that you are. So determine, tell your mind that you wanted to be present for you this evening and not go off into realms of fantasy or worry or concerns, but be present here. And have your feelings and your emotions really reflect you with a sense of honoring you, agreeing with you, being in harmony with you, so that you can be at ease and really participate in every moment of being you. And in that state, let us continue. So as I was saying before, I'm impressed by what you're aware of in terms of what you really want, because most people don't know what they want. Have you ever noticed that? They want momentary stuff, but you know what momentary stuff does? Invariably, it makes you lifelong happy, right? When you finally get that donut, or when you finally get that car, or you finally get that wife or husband or that dog or whatever, does it make you really permanently happy? No. Often it yields what? Disappointment, right? Because we invest them with things, we invest those objects with expectations that those objects can never meet, because that hasn't anything to do with really fulfilling ourselves. Do you know anybody who wants to be fulfilled?
Yes.
That means you know somebody. Everybody wants to be fulfilled. Would you agree with that, Hope? Right? Everybody wants to be fulfilled. And most people live their life in a way that guarantees their lack of fulfillment, guarantees their frustration. Or another way of saying that is, everyone wants to be loved. Do you know that that is true? Everybody wants to be loved. But look at how a lot of people that you meet, how they do. They make sure that nobody can even come close to them. They repel people, right? And if you get to know them, they do things that assure that you cannot love them. And even some people get married and assure that their marriage partner can't love them, right? So there is a difference between what we really want and what we do in our lives. Now, I don't think anybody purposely sets out to frustrate themselves in life or to make their life a failure. Would you agree? However, very few people really know anything about themselves and about what they want and what they need to be fulfilled and what would give them peace and what would give them satisfaction. Most people don't know that. I sometimes cite the example of when I'm with a group of, let's say in a big auditorium, 500 executives of big companies, and I ask them, explain the identity and requirements or needs of your typical client. Turn to your neighbor and start explaining. The hall is filled with sounds, with noise, everybody talking. Right? Then I say, okay, now explain your own personal identity and your own personal needs. Do you know what the sound in the hall is? The sound of silence. And then the logical question that I ask these esteemed, successful business executives is, okay, what is more important for you, to be successful in your business or to be successful in your life? And you know what the majority say? In their life. They have enough smarts to know that. However, how much training have you and how much effort have you spent on being an expert in your business? Oh, well, all my years of schooling and college maybe and on-the-job training and so on. How much of your life have you spent being an expert at being you, expert at your own life? Do you know that sound, the sound in the hall again? Right? It's a strange concept in our society to be an expert in life. But why is that? To me, it's strange that that is a strange concept. Do you agree? But Hope, what training have you? This is the age where she should be getting a lot of training how to be expert at her life, right? Have you gotten any yet? Yeah? Well, then you go to unusual school. And then, well, of course, we say we're getting training in the school that everybody goes to. It's the one called the School of Hard Knocks, right? But that's not necessarily the most efficient teaching thing, because do you know some people who are in their 60s and 70s and still haven't learned the same thing that they needed to learn, right? The School of Hard Knocks is not necessarily the best education. So what we're celebrating here this evening is a group of people who have assessed themselves and assessed their lives and said to themselves, I deserve to be expert at fulfilling my life, fulfilling my destiny, fulfilling myself. But now to fulfill yourself, you need to know who that self is. And if I were to ask 100 strangers or 100 of those business executives and ask them, what is that self? What is your real identity? Well, I already told you. They don't know. Well, that doesn't make any sense. How can you try to fulfill somebody, spend your life trying to fulfill some self that you don't know who that is? You know, so I use the example sometimes of a zookeeper when he goes into the storage house and gets feed for the animals, he has to know whether he's trying to feed a hummingbird or an elephant. He's got to know the identity of whom he's trying to feed, right? Whom are we trying to nurture with our lives? We find out that the majority of people have between no idea or a completely false idea of who they are. What do you think about that? It's even strange to talk about that like this. We're not used to that. Some of you are over 10 years old and you have not even addressed that question. Then you're just normal, like most people. But that's strange. How can you try to fulfill the life of someone whom you don't know, or have a completely false idea about it? I can prove it to you. I'm going to ask you right now to answer for yourself, within yourself. Who are you? Just give me one straight, to yourself. Give a straight answer. Okay? So those of you who, for example, said, I'm a man or a woman, that's false. Man or woman is just a momentary biological factor that if that were to be changed, you'd still be you, right? Right? So what we're looking for when we look for who we really are, we need to know who we permanently are, irrespective of circumstances and conditions, time, and so on. I'm a landholder. I am a businessman. Well, if you lose everything you've got, are you still you? Huh? You are, right? I'm an athlete. Well, when you get old and can't perform your athletics anymore, you're still you, right? I'm a husband or a wife. Well, after you're divorced, are you still you? Maybe some of you finally become you. Right? Because you start to face something other than distractions. I'm not saying that marriage is a distraction, though in many cases it is, but not necessarily. So, the things that I'm talking about are, in my opinion, utterly fundamental and necessary for a meaningful life, but most disregarded in our society because we live in a society of distractedness. Anything that pulls us away from the awareness of the being that we are is a distraction. Because the fundamental thing about your life is to live it in consciousness. There was a qualifier in there, in consciousness. Because we all live our life, or we all live, as long as we're still alive, we all live. But are we aware of the being that we are? How good would your life be if you were completely unaware? Like if you were comatose. That idea does not appeal, does it? Because we want to be actively engaged in consciousness. But consciousness refers to the awareness of being. But not the awareness of being of a mistaken idea, but the being that we really are. So in order to live in consciousness and meaningfully, we need to know who we really are. Not as a philosophy or as a theory or as a religion. We need to know through our own direct experience. And that's where things become really important, when you learn to cultivate direct experiences of the reality of you. And direct experience is not just listening to hearsay. That's why I say at the beginning of a series, I usually say to people, don't believe anything that I say. Because belief is lazy, right? And by belief you can be misguided. But when you experience something, you can say, I know that. I've experienced it. I know that. There is an inner knower in all of us, but by which we can be really, really clear that when I perceive that this is so, it is so, it is true, it is reality. Now, that inner knowing sometimes gets confused by wanting and attachment to things that we've been conditioned to, or fears, or society's priorities, and so on, right? So sometimes we think we really want something or know something, but it's a prejudice that has been impressed upon us. Right? Do you understand?
Yeah.
But there's a way of knowing through direct experience where you're free from all of the distortions that are perhaps adopted through our past experiences, or through the pressure of society, or through the power of our emotions, and that sometimes have to do like with fear or desire of something that comes from a perception of ourselves as lacking, and so on. So that can mess things up for us. So for us to be able to have the clear experience of what is, that is what is reality, to have the clear experience of the being that we are, we can bring about a state in our mind that is utterly clear and utterly undistracted. And the same in all of our faculties, in our feelings and our emotions, our senses even, our intellect and intuition, where they're not serving some falsity or some distortion and distraction, but where they are actually serving us in a direct, clear and empowered experience of what is and of what we are. Does that make sense to you? These people whose graduation we are celebrating this evening have cultivated purposefully and with devotion that state of unobstructed clarity, that state of focus with continuity that allows them the direct experience of what is true, what is real, what is so. How does that feel to you? What would your life be like if you were to be able to experience the reality, the truth, the what is regarding the world as well as regarding yourself, reliably, trustworthily, so that you could really trust this is true because I experience it? How would that feel for you? Terrible, right?
No.
Simple and peaceful. By the way, do you notice this is how we work? I don't lecture at you, I invite you to work together, to experience with me, even just now. So when I ask you the questions, you check with yourself. What is it that where do I stand with this? You see? Now sometimes we think it's difficult. It's difficult to become self-empowered. It is difficult to become really knowledgeable about the reality of the being that we are. Because it involves a lot of changes. It involves becoming clear as opposed to distorted and distracted. It means becoming empowered as opposed to feeling weak and passive. And it means learning how to respond to your own inner signals and practicing this ability to respond as opposed to being passive, a victim, and irresponsible. Sometimes I do spiritual guidance sessions on a somewhat as limited as I can get away with basis. In other words, not hundreds of hours per week, but I did one today with somebody in Germany, a professor who has a son who is like a well-trained, professional person, adult man, who is going through a big crisis because he is resisting becoming responsible for himself. He thinks that responsibility is a burden, and he's afraid of it. Do you know anybody who is like that? We here see the responsibility as the ability to respond. And we love the ability to respond because it helps to show us that we are alive, that we are present, and it gives an opportunity for all of our instruments of self-expression to be empowered and to work for us and to give us the joy and the invigoration of being able to do all of this for ourselves and with ourselves. Do you understand? Yeah. So we love the ability to respond, our responsibility. We don't like to be victims. We don't like to spend our lives dependent upon circumstances and conditions and what people say and what they don't do and so on and so on. We like to be empowered and to be in charge and to actually direct our lives to our fulfillment. It's a passionate engagement in our day-to-day being. And it yields tremendous strength and great comfort and great security. So to the people who say, it's so hard to change to all of that, I always say, what? The hardship lies in not doing anything about it. That's where all the hardship, that's where all the suffering lies. When you walk around in the streets and look at people's faces, do you see people who are vigorous and joyous and outgoing and loving and confident and happy in life? What do you usually see? What is characteristic of the states of people in our society? Stress, distraction, depression, fear, anxiety, and so on. Need, yeah.
You know what I've been noticing lately is how few people actually look at each other.
Yeah, eye contact.
Relationship,
They look
connection.
at their iPods.
Pardon?
They look at their iPods when they walk in. They don't see a human being, they're looking at their
Yeah, that's true, yes.
Brian, it's interesting how people take on a whole different demeanor when they're in their car.
Oh.
Yeah,
I experienced some of that this morning coming into the village. There was some real aggression, protected by the car.
yeah. And it seems like you're then anonymous, relatively anonymous.
Yeah.
So
There's no
you don't have to be responsible to somebody else for your behaviors. You see. So we are, and this is another very important topic that relates to what I said earlier, is that everybody wants to be loved. Well, because our fundamental nature is of interconnectedness. We are all, and a lot of these things you discover as we go on in our experiences together. We learn to experience our real identity. And in that experience we find what is meant by interconnectedness. Even on the most fundamental level, we're interconnected. And this doesn't explain it all yet. I'm not going to explain everything in a few minutes talk. But we learn to relate to that more and more and more. And for example, the need for love is just a sign of the fundamental interconnectedness that is expressed in an accepting way, most fundamental as the being that you are. Now, imagine that if you start a relationship, let's say with your soulmate, a relationship, but you present yourself as what you can consider a presentable facade, which is actually phony, right? But you want to be accepted as this facade, this front, right? How fulfilling is that relationship going to be to you when you do that? Huh? Do you want to think about this for a while? You've been there before? Well, we're really kind of conditioned into that in our society, you know. But the thing is, that is not a smart way to try to be fulfilled in a love relationship, because you know that the person is relating to the image that you've projected, not to you. And then there's always that underlying thing, oh my God, I gotta keep myself hidden because it would be a really terrible disappointment if the real me were to be related to or seen by the other person, right? And that's how we go through life, because it doesn't just start with a soulmate. It starts when we're like 2 or 3 years old, where we're trained to project an acceptable image, right? And none of that is done like overtly, like said. Nobody says, go ahead and project an acceptable image. It's just, we're trained into that. So the secrecy behind that makes it even worse, because we don't even know what we need to keep hidden about ourselves. There's just this unspoken agreement that there's something so nasty about ourselves that we gotta keep it hidden. We gotta project an acceptable front, right? To the extent that not only do we not share who we really are with the closest people or other people, even with ourselves. We're afraid of finding out who we really are because we've adopted this fake person as ourselves, this fake identity. Do you know what I'm talking about? Now, when you keep nurturing with your life this fake identity, what happens to you? You're not getting anything. You're left out. So you live in a land of great opportunity. I mean, we have a lot of luxury and opportunity and a lot of time here to be even considering these things. We're not struggling for daily survival, right? And yet, we feel empty, we feel lack and need, and so on and so on. Because we're not nurturing ourselves, we're giving our life to somebody who we're not. So what I'm talking about is not these are some esteemed people here who are engaging in this highfalutin hobby or this theoretical heights that they scale or this spiritual thing. No. These are people who have the goodwill towards themselves, to give themselves the nitty-gritty, what they need to be fulfilled with this life and in this life, and to actually actively engage in fulfilling their own destiny, not just to be a passive victim. That's what we're here to celebrate this evening. And we engage in practices that are at once daily and mundane, and yet highly unusual, because it's just simply because people don't do it. Like tuning into ourselves, becoming attentive to ourselves, learning to be free from the distractions of a meandering mind, to be free, to be focused, to be able to imagine if you were able to focus your mind at will over extended periods of time, and have it really be present to you, and present to your awareness of being, to your consciousness, continuously, even while you're engaged in activity and so on, but to have your mind always there for you, and your feelings being a true expression of what is going on within you, and your emotions being a wonderful self-expression of the sense of empowerment, the sense of value, the sense of agreement with yourself. Do you see? Can you imagine if you were